Welcome to Streams of Income, hosted by best-selling author and entrepreneur Dr. David Powers, where we discuss streams of income, passive income, residual income, and even why there are dinosaurs and zombies in this intro. Fasten your seatbelts and get ready to dive in.
All right, everybody, thanks for being here. Welcome to another edition of the Streams of Income podcast, and I'm excited about this. We are here with the Cashflow Ninja, MC Laubscher, and I don't know which name you prefer, MC or Cashflow Ninja, because, I mean, the Ninja one's pretty cool. But I've been really looking forward to this, and I was I've been listening to the podcast some, and I was binging again this morning just so I could come up with some fresh questions off your latest podcast. And so before we get into your intro and everything, are you going to be buying an island?
Great to be on, Dr. Dave. No, you know what? That would actually be pretty cool. Because think about if you buy an island and you have that's something that you can leverage. Number one, you will never be the most boring guy at a cocktail party. As a matter of fact, you would be the most interesting guy at a cocktail party. And then the second piece to that is, imagine if you could invite people to go out for a day to your island for a barbecue or, hey, let's go fishing on my island, Dr. Dave. You'd be like, you got an island? Come on. And then it opens up, the whole conversation. So I think it's a pretty good tool. And, I interviewed a friend of mine that recently did that up in Canada, and doors have opened like you wouldn't believe for him, because everybody wants to talk to him now. Like, wait a second, how did you guys buy an island? Like, how is this even possible? How much? Yeah. Like, what are the restrictions? What can you build? All that. A whole new world has opened up for him, so it's something that you could leverage. So I'll never say never, right?
It would be awesome. I mean, you don't even have to build a house there. I mean, just have a little shack, and people are going to want to come to there anyway. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, and that's the great thing. And if you're if you're a person that just wants some privacy and be left alone at some stage. Who's going to bother you on your own island?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look at this. All right, so part of my branding is just to go really unedited. And here I am starting this podcast, and my low battery sign is flashing. So I'm going to disappear for 1 second and plug this sucker in. So I'll tell you what, while I do that and, commit this podcast faux pas, go ahead and start telling us about yourself. And like let's do the about MC that we see on the website, and then we'll dig into some of the stuff that's not there, the dad stuff and all that.
Yeah, cool. So I'm originally from South Africa, so I grew up in a very interesting time in South Africa's history. I was a young man when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Then we had new elections as the apartheid regime was done. We had a new form of government. I saw a world that I don't think a lot of people get to see, right? And there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what's happening tomorrow. Nobody knows what's coming next. And that drives like crowds. We're all familiar with the concept of the madness of crowds, but it drives people into panic. So when people were fighting over toilet paper in 2020 in the United States, I was not surprised or shocked in any way, shape, or form, because I'm like, I have seen people how they behave when they're purely driven by emotion and they don't know what's happening, they don't know what's coming next, and so forth. So that was a gift, and also for me during that time, and what's important is you saw like you had this one reality that was basically foisted upon you. And then there's a second one that's completely 180 from the other one. So as a young man, I'm like, wait a second. So everything that I've been told is wrong and, incorrect. And now everything you're telling me now is correct. So wait a second. So I became a truth seeker, and it started there as a young man to be like, okay, what's really going on here? What is actually going on, and not what is in the newspapers, on TV, in mass and mainstream media and stuff. What is actually going on? How does the world work? And so forth. So, and that eventually it'll led me to finance and investing and cash flow streams, right? Because I was just a truth seeker in all ways, shapes, or form, whether it's health, whether it's, money, finance, investing, how the world works, that kind of stuff. I came into the US in 2001. I was traveling, playing sports. I ended up here with a, backpack, couple of $100, one suitcase, sense of humor, sense of adventure, and haven't looked back since. I guess I've enjoyed myself. It's been 25 years. I ended up playing in a sports league up until 2007. I took the money that I was making playing sports and pursuing a career in athletics, and I bought real estate. We all have our moments where we come across stuff, right? So when you play sports, you travel, you're on a team bus, you're on a team plane. We traveled all over the place, and I was that guy reading books because I loved history, economics, and going down.
You were the nerd.
Yeah, and I mean, like, from a young man, like I said, I went down rabbit holes because I was a seeker of truth and be like, what's going on? So I read a lot. And that's where I came across Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that book completely changed my paradigm, how I thought about money, wealth, how to create value in the marketplace. What's the difference between the ultra wealthy and just the average person? Because there's a massive difference. And I took action. I'm an action guy. So I bought rental real estate, probably within 6 months after reading that book. Put some tenants in there, collected rents, pay the bills, and there was cash flow. And I'm like,
yeah,
this is amazing. Just like in the book. Like, how many times can I do this? And of course, then school starts, right? Then you're like, oh, this whole thing about tenants not paying rent, that's actually a thing. Oh, and guess what? People can break your apartment, your property, your real estate, and damage stuff. I mean, I had to replace a porcelain toilet, which I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole of how there was damaged or broken. But the school started, and as I was doing this too, I was learning. I met some incredible people. I worked to learn. I jumped into real estate. I was building my own real estate business. I started to understand the power of just how systems work and financial systems work. And I reread Robert Kiyosaki's book, that Rich Dad Poor Dad, every year. So I've been reading it for about 25 years. Every year I get something new from it. People are like, how's that possible? I'm like, well, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So I think it was about the third or the fourth time I read the book, I realized that the very simplified financial statements that he shared in that book, that everything that was a liability on your financial statement was an asset of the bank. And I'm like, wait a second. The banks have got this figured out. The banks really have this figured out. And then right about that same time, I came across the work of Nelson Nash, which wrote Becoming Your Own Banker. And Nelson said, every single business owner and investor, you have to be in two types of businesses in life. You have to be in the business that you're in, and you have to be in the banking business. And there's a way to do that, because he's like, think about it. Your bank makes money whether you deposit money in checking or savings, you spend it, or you borrow money to spend and invest. Your bank makes money in every single transaction. That should be you. So how do you set that up so that you become the bank and you create this banking system as a business owner and investor? So then I met a very affluent friend through the sports network that I was a part of. And, he was like, you're interested in real estate? I'm like, yeah, I just bought a property. And he's like, oh, so you're like actually the guy that does stuff, like not just talk about it. And I'm like, yeah. So I was telling him, like, look, I'm really unemployable at this stage. Like, I can't really have a job. I'm traveling all the time, back and forth for sports. And he had a real estate company. He's like, you know what? When you're in town, jump in. We'll give you something to do. Little did I know that friend was one of the largest investors in multifamily on the north side of the city of Chicago. And I, again, from Rich Dad Poor Dad, the rich they work to learn. They don't work for money. So I literally started picking up like trash on like these multi-unit like apartments. That's literally where I started doing maintenance, painting, doing construction, eventually running construction crews, eventually like doing leasing, marketing. I think I managed over 500 units at one stage. I got my broker's license. So I learned the business literally from the ground up. But at that time too, it's funny how it all comes together, the cash flow and the banking stuff. He says, we had lunch the one day, and he's lawyer, he's CPA, and he's life insurance person was all together. And I had no idea what was going on there. At the end of the lunch, he's like, did you understand anything? And I'm like, nah, I mean, like I kind of figure what a tax guy does and a lawyer, but putting it all together, I didn't. What I didn't realize was he had a family office structure that made all their money. It was a third, fourth legacy family that they were doing very well. His great-grandfather and grandfather set this all up, but they had operating businesses generating all this cash. They would take all this cash, create their own banking system with it through infinite banking, and then they would leverage that to buy multifamily real estate and then eventually other businesses, and they would do it over and over and over. So about 10 years ago, bringing it to where I'm up to today, 10 years ago, I started my own company, Producers Wealth, and that's what we do. We're a financial services company serving business owners and investors across the United States virtually, so in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. And we help them with infinite banking, business planning, and then also family planning. And then I started to interview all these people, the clients that I was making that were doing really cool stuff. And every single conversation, I was like, wait a second, this is kind of insane. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you invest in? Like, find Scottish whiskey, like, cost in barrels, and you gotta store it. And like, I was like, this is mind-blowing stuff. So I'm like, I need to start recording this stuff. So I started to just record conversations. So that's where Cashflow Ninja came from, because I started it, I uploaded it. This was like 9 years ago. So I had no idea what I was doing podcasting. People didn't really know podcasting then. And we threw it on there, and before we know it, was in like 180 countries, downloaded millions of times. So it became
You've
like...
had some big name people on there too.
Yeah, and that was the funny thing of how that was just a passion project. I was just having fun and creating a platform and sharing interesting conversations. And then all of a sudden, you had like publishing companies reaching out to me and be like, hey, can you interview Kevin Harrington from the Shark Tank, or Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, or it was wild. So but it's been a lot of fun. And so I love talking about cash flow strategies, investing strategies. Lately, I'm very I have a little bit of an obsessive side of me, like we all have, and if we have some success in way, shape, or form. But I've really been studying family offices a lot, and I've been doing that now for 5 years. Really deep diving into it, learning everything, and my gut feeling was that this was where the buck was moving with all this. I mean, you've got estimating between 85 and 90 trillion dollars changing hands in the next 20 years. And there's a report that just came out from Ernst & Young that family office wealth, the money in and the capital in family offices, is now bigger than private equity and venture capital combined. Wow. Think about it. And that's all we see, right? We see, PE, because that's the cool thing. Private equity's cool, venture capital, because everybody loves Shark Tank, so that's cool. But it's like, hey, there's something that's actually like bigger than that. Both of those put together. So that's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's all right. So a couple quick questions, because man, you're giving me lots of rabbit holes I want to dig into. All right, so soccer or rugby? Which was the sport?
Oh, rugby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I've been playing rugby since I was 5 years old. Not obviously anymore, but stopped in 2007. Had a great time. It's a great community too around the world. You find a rugby club, and you're going to find some people to have some beers with, to have some laughs, and the characters that's in a rugby club is. I mean, you're going to find doctors, lawyers, surgeons, real estate guys, like anybody from every part of life you're going to find. any walk
Yeah.
of life.
Me and my kids love watching the some of the videos and everything coming out, and the women's rugby too. I mean, those ladies are pretty tough.
Wouldn't mess with them. No, they're tough.
No, no. All right, so rugby, and then as a truth seeker, where do you get your news from? Like, what's the source? What's a news source that you actually trust? I mean, I'm sure you probably dig into a lot of the original sources, but like, if you just wanted a quick recap of the day, where do you go?
This is a very, very good question. So what I try to do is I try to filter my feeds. So the one, I've got like a mainstream feed, and then I have an alternative media feed too. So if I go through the one feed, I get all the headlines from your mainstream, and I'm like, okay, so that's the one narrative, because there's different narratives, because you think about it, we think in narratives. We think in stories. We do. I mean, this is who we are as humans. We used to sit around the fire and listen to our parents and our grandparents just tell stories, and that was the imagination. This is before TV and iPads and all the cool stuff. But with that element, you can't take away from people. So even if you see the news, there's a story going on. So when I do that, I kind of have an idea of what the official kind of like narrative is, and the mainstream, what they want you to believe and think kind of stuff. And then I have an alternative one where, there's like 15 different types of sites. There's really good investigative journalists. Like the Corbett Report is a very, very good one. And then you have to actually subscribe and pay for services to get good stuff. People that spend their time researching and writing, so like the Solari Report with Catherine Orson Fitz is really good. The Trends Journal with Gerald Celente. These are all subscription-based models. They do have content that they put out and comment on current events. Zero Hedge is also a good one. So what did I name? Corbett Report, Solari, with Solari.com, that's Catherine Orson Fitz. You got the Trends Journal with Gerald Celente, Zero Hedge, and there's probably 6-7 other journalists just like that are, and I don't mind paying for information too. And like with financial data, John Williams' Shadow Stats is a pretty good one too. Yep. Because that actually gives you all the government numbers before they started all the chicanery and the the nonsense. And then there's also, which is interesting, there's also now a service, Trueflation. I think it's trueflation.org. But anyway, they also have data. But this is kind of a pretty cool hack, that what they've done. And I wouldn't call it a hack. This is AI. So they scrape the internet with prices and stuff. And so they come up with their own inflation number. And their own inflation number versus what the government is telling you. Yeah. When you actually see their data, the first time somebody shared that with me, I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because they were sharing, I'll give you an example. They were sharing from 2020, when the money printer went brrr, 2020 to where we were at like a month ago, the actual inflation compounded during that time was around about 25, 26%. And I looked at that and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. If you go to the store and you pay for something, you're probably paying 25 to 26% more for everything that you're buying, right? Yeah. And also people will push back and argue and say, well, what about this and that? And I said, well, if you use the replacement method, of course, you used to get a filet mignon. This is how the government does it. And now you get a skirt steak, but the skirt steak, is that it's the same price. So there's no inflation, right? Yeah. I'm like, but the one's filet mignon, the other one's skirt steak. What are you guys talking about? It's not even the same thing. So, but the pushback on that, there's still pushback on that. And I would say, okay, if you can't replace stuff, like a very, very good example, and the insurance industry in general is like, it's math. There's no ideology. It's math. So when you look at property and casualty and somebody has to underwrite your automobiles, they really don't care about anything else. It's all just math and algorithms and how to hedge themselves to be a profitable company and provide coverage for your automobile, right? So automobile insurance, and I did this, I shopped around because my guy was like, oh, you went up 25%. And I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Called 3 or 4 other people. Exact same price range. all of them went up 25%.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's probably your inflation right there. But back to your original question, yeah, I'm part of groups too, and this taken years where you have people that have boots on the ground in different places. Like if I wanted to figure out what was going on in the war in the Ukraine, I was in a group actually that there was a journalist that ended up being I don't know what else to put it, murdered by the Zelensky regime. So in prison over there, Gonzalo Lira. So he was providing intel on the ground, what's actually happening there. So that's like a sort. And then I like to call people, if I hear something about Dubai, I know I have a friend in Dubai. So I'm like, hey, what's going on there, buddy? I hear all the gold's moving from Swiss vaults over there. I read some articles. Is there any truth to it? And he would be like, no, that's nonsense. Or he would be like, you know what? There's so much money coming in here right now from Europe. It's like insane. And from the Middle East. So I think like sometimes your primary, if you're blessed to know people around the world, to get the information directly from them, that's going to be your best source of info. Yeah. But there's some great stuff on the there's some great journalists, independent journalists out there doing great work.
Yeah, that's almost a weird thing to hear now. Is a true journalist, not somebody that's just writing sensational headlines.
Right, because everybody's trying to out clickbait each other. And coming up with more. I mean, look at the marketing kind of stuff that we're exposed to. I don't know, like it's crazy. When I just go on the internet or if I'm on social media, the ads that I get, it is incredible because the marketing just becomes more over the top. Because if you think about it, the average person is living in a world where every single day it's fight or flight because they wake up and go, oh, the world is ending because somebody's doing something today that I should be upset about, and they're telling me I should worry about and be upset about every day, right? So so it's fight or flight every single day. So that's the marketing. Now you're competing with that for eyeballs.
Oh yeah, that's a little crazy. All right, so infinite banking. I know a little bit about it just from some people I've followed over the years, some stuff I've read, but probably a lot of my listeners don't even know what you mean when you say that. So tell us kind of as simple as like fifth grader education style, what is infinite banking and why should they do it?
Yep. Awesome question. I'll tell you a story. So I had a mentor, this is like 25 years ago. Before all the websites and the meetup.coms and all that stuff, the cool kids used to hang out, IRL is what they call it in real life at like real estate investor meetups. So I did that. And there was an older gentleman that was there. And this is the great thing about real estate investors too, and investors in general, people that have made it, they usually want to pass it forward, right? And to someone else. They see a young up and coming investor that's getting after it and excited, and they're like, I could see a little bit of myself in them. I want to help them. So he started telling me, he's like, look, MC, he goes, in the 70s, I want to share you a strategy that this will change everything for you. I said, okay, well, I'm all ears. Let's go. So he said, in the 70s, the interest rates were really high. So you would get like 10+% in a CD. Younger listeners listening to this is probably falling off their chairs or tripping right now.
What's a CD?
Yeah, exactly. Or what's a CD? And he would go to a bank if he had $100,000. Let's just say he would go to a bank. He would put that $100,000 in a CD in the bank, and he would earn, let's just say 10% on it. And he would then go back to that exact same bank and go to the banker and say, Mr. or Mrs. Banker, I've got $100,000 in a CD with you guys right now. Can I get a loan secured by that $100,000? Can I get a loan that is backed by that? And the banker would go, yeah, of course. And because they have a secured loan, in which savings like a CD, it's a pretty secured vehicle. It's not like real estate where the bank can get a haircut, if they have to take the property back, sell it at a loss, that kind of stuff. You would get pretty low interest rates. So you would get lower than what they actually was even paying you in that because of the risk involved for the bank. So let's just say they would give you, and I'm just for simple math, they would give him a loan for $90,000, 90% of that 100K at like 9%. So then he would take that 90K and he would buy real estate and put people in there, and it produced cash flow. Let's just say, $500 a month, after everything is paid. He would pay back that 90K with the $500, but now he has a property that he has with tax benefits, with a tenant in there generating cash flow, but he still has a CD that every single year is earning 10%. So boom, after 1 year, that's 110, and then 10% on 110, and it compounded in there. And yes, you still had to pay taxes on that. That basically what he did there is this collateralization strategy. Now you can do this with stocks. Elon Musk bought Twitter with this exact same strategy where he placed Tesla shares as collateral for a loan from financial institutions to put the majority, the bulk of the capital down to buy Twitter. And then the investment banks came in. So he did exactly that. He just used securities to do that, because think about it. If he had to sell Tesla shares, where that's the majority of his stuff was, he had to pay taxes on that. So he doesn't have to pay taxes on that, and he gets one asset to then leverage it to buy another asset. You could do the same thing with gold and silver. There's actually in our network, and we had a podcast episode about this, where you can buy gold in the Cayman Islands, store it there, and then use that gold as collateral for loans. So you can have $100,000 of gold, and they will give you, in this case, they give you 75%, but they give you 75K as a loan, let's just say 5-6%, that you can go buy real estate. Now you have your gold and you have real estate. One asset that you leverage to buy another one. You could do the same thing with art. Business owners know this very well. They can place the assets of the business, equipment, that kind of stuff, as collateral for lending. They can also place receivables for loans and line of credits that they have. Real estate investors know this very, very well, because they're all familiar with home equity line of credits, right? So you have a home. Let's just say it's a rental property. You have a person in there. It appreciates. There's equity in it. And how do you tap into that? You get a line of credit secured by the equity in the property. So where does infinite banking come in? Infinite banking is the exact same thing that I shared, and I'll go back to that CD, using life insurance, a very specifically designed life insurance policy. And it's actually that CD example on steroids. And it's actually, if you think of all the other ones that I just named, it is the best one, in my opinion. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've done the gold and silver one. I've done actually crypto too. You could do the same thing with Bitcoin. You get your fingers burned with that one if you're not careful. You have to manage collateral pretty well. But I've done many of these different lines. The best one is life insurance, and I'll explain quickly why. This is a very specifically designed dividend-paying whole life insurance policy with a mutual life insurance carrier, not the one that Dave Ramsey hates. I actually agree with Dave Ramsey. That is how life insurance is sold to the public, retail, right? We're talking about how life insurance is sold to the ultra affluent, ultra wealthy in family offices. So the majority of the capital is going straight to cash value. So usually of your premiums that you put in, around about 70 to 80% goes straight to the cash value. And then you have your death benefit. So why would you do that? The money that you put inside of that contract that's very specifically designed is guaranteed. You could never lose it. It's guaranteed to grow. And of course, because the policies with a mutual life insurance company, you get dividends. They're not guaranteed, but these companies have paid them for 170 years plus consecutively, right? And that's also tax-free. So you'll never pay taxes on the money in that policy ever again. As opposed to the CD, where every year you had to still pay taxes on that money, right? So this, you never pay taxes again. The other thing is, I have a guaranteed access to the life insurance company, to my capital in my life insurance policy through a policy loan, guaranteed. So that it's not like a HELOC that they can pull like I had mine pull in 2008.
Okay, so you can loan it. You can loan the money from your bank, so to speak.
Your own policy, yes. So think about it. Using that example, let's just say you have $100,000 in cash value in your life insurance policy, right? You can request a policy loan from the life insurance company and say, can I get a loan secured by that $100,000? And they're like, of course, you can have 95%. So $95,000 is what you would get. And the interest rate right now that you would get is 5.3%. And people who are listening to this probably right now, at the time of recording, your HELOCs are 8-9%. Yeah. Why? How can you get 5.3% on a life insurance loan? Because of the collateral. The risk for the life insurance company is almost nothing because they have the capital in there. They have your money, and then they have a death benefit, by the way. So they're covered twice. But what you get to do is your money inside of your life insurance policy is growing, compounding, tax-free. The dividends are around 6% right now, by the way. So at 6%, it's compounding, and you get to borrow and invest and repay, be your own bank at 5.3%. And then the other thing is, too, it's a private contract between you and the insurance company. They've been made good on their contracts for 170 years plus. You also have a death benefit. So if you think about the banking system that I shared earlier, your bank makes money whether you deposit money in a bank, you save it, you spend it, you borrow to spend or save. In this scenario, you've created a mini bank, right, with this policy. Because whether I put money in it, whether I spend the money, whether I borrow to spend or invest, I make money from it. My policy continues to grow uninterrupted at 6%. I get to borrow, control the cash flow, put it into something that pays me so I can make money in real estate that way. And I have two assets that is appreciating in value simultaneously. So when you then scale this is, you've probably heard of the term family banking. So in family offices, and what you can do is set up a trust for your family, have the policies of the husband, the wife, the kids, all in this trust. And now you have a family bank, which, you can have one line of credit. There's many creative ways to do this. One line of credit set up, secured by all those policies. And it's a revolving line that you get to borrow from your own family bank, fund your businesses, fund your investments, and repay it back. My company, Producers Wealth, that help people set up these policies, actually borrowed money from my family bank, my trust this year. So we incorporated AI. We hired 3 full-time people. So our family, it's a separate entity. It's a separate trust. It's a family business. Our family business became a private lender to our company. And let's just say in this example, let's just use $100,000. It cost me 5% to borrow it from the insurance company, right? But my trust, because it is its own entity, charged my company 10% in that scenario. So my company used the money, great loan. I mean, interest and principal, the way that it's structured, we repaid the interest. My family trust and bank pocketed $5,000 in that example. My business had money to grow and to expand, and I didn't have to go to a bank and beg for money and go through a proctology exam, leaving there without any money anyway. So that's why this is such a powerful system to set up, this whole banking and be your own bank, because if you think about it, you never, ever have to worry about accessing funds ever again for investments and to grow your businesses. Yeah, man, this sounds amazing. I'm thinking the interest thing too. I mean, so you borrowed money from your own family bank, and you're paying interest because you would have paid that to the bank or a credit card or HELOC or something anyway. So it might as well be you guys that make the money on that. That's it. I mean, instead of a Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase or insert mega bank here. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you just structure your affairs and your life and the cash flow so that you get to profit from it? And this was the thing that just struck me like a bolt of lightning, 20 something years ago. When I saw this, the first thing was, I'm like, no, This can't, because the funny thing is, and I'm sure people have asked you too. I had the privilege to have been into a room with a lot of wealthy people, and I know a lot of people, and like that friend of mine, pure luck, no idea what his family was into. So it wasn't like I seeked it out, but then you get access to that and you see the information and you're like, they do the complete opposite of what everybody else is telling the general public to do. They never lose control of their capital. They structure their affairs in such a way where it benefits them. They're the bank. And this way, they grow contractually, because that's the other thing. Life insurance, just goes up contractually.
Yeah.
So contractually, every single year, the net worth of their family grows. And with every generation, there's a windfall of death benefit, right? And then they get to grow and just scale their real estate portfolio because contractually, they're going to have access to all this money. So it just blew me away that there's a way. And that's why actually the book that I wrote is called Get Wealthy for Sure. And people are like, man, that's a bold statement right there. It's like what's the catch? And I'm like, no, if you think about what these families do, and this is, we've seen people talk about the Rockefeller method. This is literally it. This is it. This is what they do.
I've heard it called legacy banking too, because you're creating something that carries further beyond than you.
If you think about it, inside the Rockefeller family office, people call this the Rockefeller method. Inside the family office, their family office, they call it the waterfall. Because I like to think in pictures and doodles and stuff too. It's easy for me to remember. A rugby player, right? I got in the head a lot. But the waterfall is a perfect example to illustrate it. So let's just say you and your spouse. You guys are the first generation, and you guys set up this little banking system for your family, but you also max out your death benefit. Like, let's just say your banking policies are like $5 million each, but you could get 10 million, each. So there's ways to creatively buy it without costing a fortune in life insurance to get to the 10 million. Now, when you pass away, 20 million bucks fall to your children. And if you have 3 or 4 children, now in Gen 2, what do they do with the 20 million bucks? Well, they don't spend it because it's in a trust. The trust is instructing that money to go to more policies, all on the 4 kids, let's just say. So now you got the 4 kids, and that 20 million bucks, let's just say, buys between them, let's just say it goes to, let's go 80. Now you have 80 on the second line, right? And it's just for simple math. Now, when that second generation passes away, 80 falls to the grandchildren. You started with 20 between, the first gen. You got 80 on the third generation. And again, what does the trust do? It instructs the money to go towards more policies. And then again, and then it goes to the 4th generation and the 5th generation. So people ask the question, why it's, we've all heard shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generation. Like, how do you change that? This is how you is how you change that. So, but anyway, so it's extremely powerful. It creates a legacy. And that's the other thing we talk a lot about, what legacy is, and, studying these families and what you can do inside of your own home, because that's where it all starts, of living your legacy. And because the other thing is, it's one thing to set up the system, but you got to live it, you got to breathe it, and you got to teach it so that the knowledge is transferred to the children and the grandchildren. Because if there's just money in a trust and there's no knowledge transfer, all this stuff is, it's gonna find a way to leak outside of that system, because you're gonna find some nefarious characters just in like every industry, every part of life. Yes, exactly. It's gonna find a way, right?
So how much money would somebody need to, like, just bare bones get started in something like this? Like, what would be an initial?
Well, if you like, when it starts to make sense, if you can dedicate $10,000 or more to this, that's when it starts to make sense.
Yeah.
Because the first year, the first couple of years, just like with any business, there's a buildup, right? So let's just say you put $10,000 into a policy, you're probably going to have $7,000 or $8,000 available, inside of that policy to start the system with, and then it's going to start to grow and grow, and before you know it, 10 years in, there's $120,000 using that 10K per year. And it's the same. $100,000 you put in to this policy, you're going to have probably around 80K there to play this game first year, but 10 years in, there's $1.2 million in there. It grows exponentially because of the compounding effect of it. So no, I would say if you are a person that's earning $100,000 a year and up, this is a no-brainer. If you're a business owners, this thing is a no-brainer. If you're a business owner that is generating, $500,000 and up, when you get to $1 million in gross revenue, this is a no-brainer because you could literally structure a system where you can diversify, number one, outside of your business without robbing your business of the money, which that whole thing of diversification for business owners, which financial advisors tell them, that means you give financial advisors the money, they put it in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, so you're putting your money in other people's businesses. Yeah. And starving your own, which makes no sense whatsoever. This way you keep the control over the capital, which is a very fundamental principle. You know you can access it at any time, and it is now a second business that you're starting because this little bank of yours can borrow the money to the business and then back and forth. And eventually, 5-10 years into it, you don't have to go to a bank to beg anymore. So, it's a pretty powerful strategy. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so if people want to dig into that though, they can get in touch with you at Producers Wealth.
Yeah, so they could go to getwealthyforsure.com. That's getwealthyforsure.com. And when they go there, we are actually giving away a copy of my book, Get Wealthy for Sure. So they can request it there, just pay for shipping and handling, and we'll ship it to you, a physical book. And that what they'll also see at getwealthyforsure.com is there's videos of case studies of all these things, and we run numbers, we show you all these different things, and then there's also a link to submit your information and book a call with one of my team members. And again, we're licensed in all 50 states and Washington D.C. So if you're in the United States, we'll be able to help you. This is a fun fact too. I started this firm in 2015, so it's our 10 years, but it's all virtual. I started it on Skype. So it's just so funny how far we've come because people were like, how do we work with you? I'm like, well, you got to go on the internet. You got to download Skype. They're like, what's Skype? So it was a whole education process back then. And then 2020 happened and we were set up, but we've been virtual for 10 years. So
yeah, well, I mean, in terms of thinking differently, you're doing this bank thing, people set up their own banks, but it's not like your name is on the side of a big skyscraper in Atlanta, And so you got to do things different. I mean, you're also not the Edward Jones that's got to pay, $5,000 a month rent at some storefront that's, half the money's going to fees and stuff. So I mean,
no, that's the thing. We're very, very lean, and that's why we can provide the value and massive value to all of our clients. And it's a different way, a different mindset. But this is people ask me the one thing, right? Because there's a lot of cash flow. I've been an investor in single family properties is where I started. Then I grew into multifamily. Still am a general partner in a large multifamily real estate business. I'm a partner in some historic resorts where I have a great operator. Many different investments that I've in, and people ask me, what's the one thing that has made the difference? I'm like, this is actually the one thing, the system. Because everybody just focuses on vehicles, right? Should I invest in, single family real estate? And you're like, it's such an open-ended question there. It's like, who are you? Like your experience, there's about 100 questions I can ask you as a follow-up, but if you think in terms of like strategy, okay, what do I want to achieve and how do I get there? And then how do I build a system inside of the strategy to get me there is the big thing from a cash flow standpoint. Because people think cash flow just investing. No, cash flow is everywhere. Money comes into your personal business and investing economy every day. if you don't have a plan for it and a cash flow management system, there are so many cash flow leaks. And that's another thing that we identify, it produces well for people too. Sometimes we find people hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're unknowingly losing just through cash flow leaks. I mean, it's like duplicate insurance coverages is like, very higher deductibles kind of stuff. It's no brainers when you have a system in place, so you could find this money that's just leaking, and then once you've plugged the leaks, now you have more money right in your system.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Taxes is the other thing. Like how much money goes through our system and then we just pay for taxes every single year. So cash flow, it means a lot of different things, and sometimes. And this is what I learned also at a family office. This blew my mind too, by the way, because I was just so focused on like strategy, investment, like scale, grow. And this one advisor inside of this family office said to me, he was a friend of mine, and I looked at what they were doing with the families, and I'm like, dude, all you guys are doing is talk about tax and legal stuff here. And then he starts laughing, and he looks at me, and he goes, MC, do you know if we like cut this family's taxes by like, let's just say 20% this year, just through efficiency, there is no rate of return in the marketplace over the course of 10, 15, 20 years that'll be able to beat that. Not a single one.
Yep.
And that blew me away. And I'm like, that is crazy, because we're so focused on, okay, what's the next like double or triple or home run we're going to hit as an investor, right? Where these guys are like, no, you cut your taxes by 20% this year, and then it compounds next year, the year. They're like, there's no investment that's going to beat that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm in a totally different world than you, but I mean, I help a lot of small entrepreneurs, and I try to get all of them to think of deductions and home office as a side hustle. I mean, because if you can save all that money in taxes, and that's just the beginning. I mean, that's not even reaching the barrier you guys are hitting with saving entire percentage points in taxes. It's crazy stuff.
Right. And then also the game of the other thing that we also share with a lot of people is the kind of the fraud of deferring taxes, because that's the other thing. We've all been sold on that. And if you just sit down and think about this for a second, it doesn't make any sense to any rational human being to be like, okay, so I'm going to get a tax break now, a little small one. I'm going to put my money into a vehicle, and this is going to grow into a mountain. And when I pull it out, which I have no idea how much is going to be in there, or I have no idea what the tax rates are going to be, I pay taxes then? I'm like, how does that make any sense? And in family offices, the rule that they operate on is you pay taxes when you know what they are and you can control them and you can mitigate them. You don't leave an unknown variable like that. And there are people sitting with millions of dollars in 401ks, let's just say, or IRAs. And I understand you could do a Roth, which is also a great strategy to not pay the taxes later. But if you're just leaving open-ended, wow, you've got a surprise coming. Oh, the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to be a bumpy ride if you're waiting to defer taxes until then.
Well, think about the mindset shift between what you're talking about and like the W-2 employee that basically loans their money to the IRS all year, and then in April thinks they're getting a bonus. They're not, I mean, they just loaned that money to the government and got nothing in return.
I also think that there's going to be more creative ways to get, because if you think about it, right, and that's just not in the United States, everybody's bankrupt. Every single government on this planet they're bankrupt, over indebted, they've borrowed too much. And then if you think about, and that's from a federal or a national level, then you think about a state or provincial, they're all bankrupt too. And then when you get to municipal towns and cities, you're going to have to really look far to find like solvent towns and cities and municipalities. So it's an interesting world that we're in. So if you think about everybody's bankrupt and they're going to need money in some way, shape, or form, where do you think that they're going to get that from? We don't have the most creative people in government that's going to come up with something that's going to increase the value, to the marketplace, and it's going to result in an economic boom. So how are they going to come up with that? Well, they've already showed you one way, and that's cutting, which was long overdue. The government's it's a behemoth. So you're going to have to cut it, and then eventually, it's kind of funny if you see the mainstream, everybody's freaking out about the cuts. I'm like, this is the simple ones. The deep ones are coming when you're going to have to cut services, entitlements, all, because there's no way out of this. This is coming.
Oh yeah, people are going to be losing jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So, cutting is one way of them, and cutting a lot. The other one is is cutting spending significantly. So we'll see how that plays out. And then the other one is raising taxes.
Yep.
And you could do all three too, which is not going to be fun for anybody if your economy was basically based on government spending, which most of the countries around the world, that's what it is.
Yep. Yeah, man, you got me thinking now, because you're talking about the going from the country to the municipality and all that, and then I started thinking about churches. I mean, like my church owes millions to a bank right now.
Yep.
And and then you've got the danger of, like, if that 501c3 ever got pulled for some reason, and all of a sudden the church has to pay taxes, because that is a huge tax base right there that's not being tapped. And
that is also why. Yeah, church. That's why, hats off to the churches that have stood firm with all the shenanigans going on in this world too, because that's another lever, is that 501c status. You're 100% correct, where they can bully people into doing things that they wouldn't necessarily do, or go along with certain, agendas, which they would never ever do, but the threat of that 501c3 hangs over them. So that's why, the concept of sovereignty, financial sovereignty, because you hear a lot about financial freedom, which is great. I'm all about that. Another level is like financial sovereignty. So for you and your family, for your business, and then, churches or organizations like that, if you could get to financial sovereignty, which puts you in a position where, you're not dependent on falling systems, and nobody's hanging something over you, where if you don't play ball, then they could do something. You just want to try and put yourself in the best possible position, in a position of strength. And that comes back to, when I talked about the financial strategy with the banking system, that's part of the financial sovereignty strategy.
Yeah, man, how powerful would a church full of financially sovereign people be? I mean, that'd be amazing.
It'd be unshakable. You can't shake them, because again, they are all financially sovereign, and the church is financially sovereign. So yeah, it would be very, very hard to move that rock and that beacon.
Oh yeah. Right? Wow. All right. So as we get ready to close out here, I always like to ask everybody, if you had 3 top or favorite resources that we've already mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but like maybe another 3 that just, if you recommend something somebody should read, somebody they should follow or listen to, what would you tell people just to set them up for success?
The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, you're not the first person to mention that one.
That, if you want to know how what money is, and how money works, and then also how the global financial system works and the banking system work, I mean, that piece of work that G. Edward Griffin did, I mean, we're literally seeing it play out right now. That book is evergreen, priceless. So
that's crazy, because the guy from Thailand I mentioned earlier that I interviewed, he was an Australian expat living in Thailand. He recommended that book, and it's worldwide. Just one to know about.
Oh, it's, and I mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'll also throw in his book, The Cashflow Quadrant. That is actually, in my opinion, that's probably his best book, because that gives you the code to go from an employee or self-employed to a business owner and investor. Yeah. So it literally is the code to get you from the one side where you're heavily taxed, not a lot of control, to least tax, more control over the capital, and owning and starting a business, investing in real estate, and setting up, infinite banking. That puts you on the right side of that cash flow quadrant. For folks not familiar with it, you have the employed and the self-employed, the E and the S on the left side. On the right side, you have the B and the I, which is the business owner and the investor. So it's moving from the left side to the right side. That's a really good one. And then for folks that also want to learn more about infinite banking, besides my book, Get Wealthy, for sure. There's a book called Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. He was one of my mentors. He called it Becoming Your Own Banker, not become, because it's a process, and it's you always learn. You're becoming. You never arrive in knowledge. You're always learning. It's a system. It's a process that never stops.
Oh yeah, man. Cashflow Quadrant. I always looked at that as like Rich Dad Poor Dad. Read it, whet your appetite. You're going to know if you're into that or not. And then Cashflow Quadrant always seemed to me like the advanced version of the same book. Like once you're ready, here's the actual skeleton of what you need to do.
The blueprint. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. Man, I appreciate you being here. This is pretty cool. And I've learned some stuff. And first thing I'm going to do after I do the write-up on my notes is hop on to the getwealthyforsure.com and order that book, because I want to read up on this a little more. Infinite banking is not something I've done, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while. And so I really need to look into it, because I got 5 kids. They're growing up, probably going to be grandkids soon. It's time to set up some legacy.
There you go. Awesome. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. Hey, everybody, I just wanted to mention one last time before you go, if you ever want to do any brainstorming, let's say you listen to one of these podcasts and you thought to yourself, Dave, that was an amazing guest. And your interview questions were so thoughtful and introspective and inspiring. It made me think about something new, but I don't have anybody to talk to about this. Well, that's what I'm here for. If you ever want to do a brainstorming session, I don't charge the same price for those that I do my regular coaching sessions, because the coaching sessions are, that's like a long-term thing. I work with people and hold their hand and tons of homework, stuff like that. But if you ever want to just get on a call and do some brainstorming, I love doing those. I love meeting new people in different occupations, things that I don't know anything about, and have them tell me all their secrets, all their goals, all their dreams, and we brainstorm new income ideas. And you know what I really like? Let me tell you a secret. One of the things I really like doing is helping people see how they can make additional income or create new income streams based off of things they're already doing. In other words, don't add another job. Don't take on another part-time job. Don't add 15 side hustles to your existing income streams, or stream if you're possibly in a full-time W-2 job. What I like doing is brainstorming with folks. It's like my specialty, and helping them figure out how to make money, more money, new money, sometimes passive money, with things they're already doing. And so if you want to do a brainstorming session on something like that, or anything else, I mean, I don't mind talking about anything. Getting your kids into entrepreneurial stuff, trying to work with your spouse because they hate entrepreneurial stuff, whatever you want to talk about, click the link below. It should be in the show notes. I say below. I'm not sure how you're watching this, but it is in the show notes, whether those are on the side, below, or somewhere else. But check the show notes. There's a link in there for the $99 brainstorming sessions. And, if you want to, feel free to email me, ask me if it's the right fit for you before you book, whatever you want to do. But just be sure to get the help you need to make sure that you're able to take those next steps toward your income streams.